Trustee Stepp, Trustee Wyckoff, Trustee Davis.
Yes.
The roll's been called and we do not have a quorum,
Okay.
nor do I anticipate having one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Then we'll do, can we approve the agenda?
No. You can,
Okay.
yeah, you can talk about, item 5, however.
Right. Okay. Well, let's skip down to item 5 because that doesn't require any vote. And I'll turn it over to Aaron and Jennifer to bring us up to date on the personnel budget.
Sure. So thank you. Today we have Jennifer Ridley here with us to go over the personnel budget that we've put together for this coming fiscal year. And I will turn it over to Jennifer. She'll give us a brief overview of where we are and where we're going.
Thank you. Like you said, I'm Jennifer Ridley. I'm the Human Resources Director for the library. And we're going to review the 2025-2026 personnel budget proposal. It is in the actual numbers for the budget in detail are on board docs, including a supplemental data packet that has additional detailed information that was used to create the estimates in this proposal. We can go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about how the budget is created, what the pieces of it are before we dig into the actual numbers. There are 3 elements of the budget. Compensation, of course, is the biggest piece, what we pay people, benefits for staff, and then employee recognition. We can go to the next slide. So the different pieces that we'll talk about that we have numbers for are first what the allowance is for full-time equivalent benefits eligible staff. This is, a full-time equivalent could be one full-time employee, it could be 2 half-time employees, or a combination of part-time employees who work 2,080 hours per year. We'll talk about the total salaries for benefits eligible staff, part-time staff total wages. We'll talk about we'll touch on mandatory payroll expenses, employee benefits expenses, and then the expenses related to employee recognition. You can go to the next slide. As a refresher real quick, we do have 3 categories of employees here at MCPL. Full-time employees work at least 40 hours a week. They receive subsidized health, dental, and vision insurance benefits, life and disability insurance, loggers retirement, PTO. They have access to group voluntary insurance programs such as Aflac, Legal Shield, nationwide, access to a 457B retirement savings plan and an employee assistance program. Half-time employees work 20 hours a week exactly. They have access to insurance at group rates, but it's unsubsidized. They also receive loggers retirement, PTO. They have access to the group rates of voluntary insurance and the 457B retirement savings plan, as well as access to the employee assistance program. Part-time employees are limited to 950 hours per year, and they receive paid bereavement leave, access to the 457 retirement savings plan, and access to the employee assistance program. We can go to the next slide. So since the fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year, the number of benefits eligible FTEs, this allowance, has remained the same. We are allotted 417.5 benefits eligible FTEs. We continue to use capacity evaluation as part of our ongoing strategy. So we review each vacated benefits eligible position to determine the best place to allocate those resources instead of just automatically filling the vacated position as is. So being agile like this as an organization has allowed us to continue to innovate and react to the changing needs of our customers, and also contracting appropriately, reducing positions appropriately in areas where, technology has improved processes or where our service priorities have changed. So you can see over that period of time from 2022 until now, where we have added positions and where we have reduced positions on this slide. You can see where we've added positions in areas where we needed some more infrastructure, staffing support, such as facilities, finance, HR, IT, and reduce positions in places where, like tech services, where, over time, the, materials come in processed, somewhat already processed, requires fewer people to get those materials customers. In addition to what you see on this slide, I do want to point out that, also during this time, we'd staffed with that same amount of benefits eligible FTEs. We did staff, 2 completely new branches in East Lee Summit and East Independence, as well as implemented a program where we swapped out FTEs to elevate some frontline positions to being customer service supervisors so that we always have a supervisor on duty in the branches where that is, has become necessary, particularly with the uptick in use of our third spaces, our meeting rooms and community rooms and things like that. We can go to the next slide. So how I wanted to touch briefly on how we set compensation and what the pieces of that look like. To remind everyone, we did do a complete market compensation study where we went out and got data from the market in 2022 and priced about 60% of our job titles. We continue ongoing to obtain market compensation data. And in 24-25, we obtained data for about 15% of our job titles, just to ensure that we're setting our wages and salaries appropriately. We use aggregate compensation databases to research the market pricing particularly when we have a new role or we're looking at key job families. So like this year, we looked at, we got market compensation data for non-managing professional librarians, for example. The data comes from resources either in the public and private sector, depending on the role. So, when we're pricing jobs that cross over public and private sector, we'll get data for both of those places. Once we have that data, we build a wage and salary structure that slots positions on the grade where the midpoint considers the market compensation data, as well as our organizational structure and the details of how that position works at MCPL within its role. We consider the skills and experience that are required, the scope of the work, and the responsibility, as well as the potential impact of the mistakes in a position. If someone were to make a mistake, that professional risk is an important factor as well when we are setting compensation and slotting positions on a wage structure. In 2025, in April, we did adjust the entire wage structure and moved it up by approximately 1%. The next piece, the range analysis of incumbents. We don't do all incumbents every year, but we do definitely look at considering total tenure and time in position, particularly when someone is being promoted or if we are looking at positions in a job family. And then we look at benchmarking to outside organizations, and we can move on to the next slide to kind of talk about some of those pieces of compensation drivers that all play into the decisions that we make around compensation. Minimum wage increases are important. Missouri will likely be at $15 an hour by 1/1/26. Right now, our pages, our folks that put the books away, shelve the books, as well as do shelf organization and reading, are currently at $14.45 an hour. That's been a difficult one to keep up with as of late, but that's continues to be a marker that we look at. We look at inflation markers, so year over year from last March till this March, We saw a 2.6% increase in the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. We can go out and look at market compensation trends. So in 2024, the average or mean wages for customer service workers in libraries was 1704 in local government. So your public library customer service staff nationwide, that average is about 1731. The starting wages for like entry-level service workers in our area, so we do compete for that talent, because not everybody starts at a library. We do have lots of folks that end up on our front line that you see in the libraries every day. They come to us from other segments of the workplace out there. So average starting wages for entry-level service workers for 2024 is at $16.36 an hour. That's actually a little bit, it's come down just slightly. We do look at internal metrics, things that we know that we have set as pieces of data that we want to look at. We did prioritize starting in 23. We did prioritize looking at entry-level staff wages, or in 22, frankly. Those people that work as customer service associates in the branches, their starting wage is now at $16.70 an hour, which is up about almost 22%, or $3 an hour since the 21-22 fiscal year. And the average hourly wage for our benefits eligible entry-level staff member that works as an associate in the branch, or as a processor in technical services or interlibrary loan, or as a driver or sorter on the dock, that has increased from $17.15 in the 21-22 fiscal year to the current average, which is $21.12. We also look at turnover. It's not the only factor that we look at. And pay compensation is not the only factor in why we might have changes in turnover rates, but it is a metric that we look at to determine if we are paying competitively enough for people to stay. And in 2024, MCPL turnover was at 14.71%, which is the lowest that it's been since 2018 when we started tracking it closely. It has hovered right around every year between 19 and 21%. So this was a pretty significant change in 2024. We do have to also look at workforce changes. About we look at what it costs to replace the folks that are doing the work now, because we know that we are going to have some turnover. And we have always and continue to leverage the skill sets and the willingness to learn from our existing staff to try to cover increased needs in areas like technology, and how technology is applied to all of our positions to whatever degree that is. But we want to, when we are recruiting people, we want to make sure that we're recruiting people that have the education and experience to assist us in running an organization of our size that's doing the work that we do. We've expanded our support for the librarians and library workers by expanding HR, IT, finance, and the communications department, and with some focus on providing necessary redundancy or backup in those areas. So there is an additional cost for those additional skills in the current market, and that in every market, but we definitely are seeing it now. Overall, people just don't stay as long as they used to. They don't stay as long to learn something over the, several things over the course of their career with one employer. And so when we go to replace the person that may have been here a long time, we're likely looking for a very specialized skill set that may cost us more than it does to upskill current staff members. Okay, so let's dig into the actual numbers of the budget. We can move to the next slide. The first number that we'll look at are the benefits eligible wages and salaries. And should I get this right? The projected salaries of the authorized, that was 417.5 position that were capped at for 25-26 is $24,200,000. We do an adjustment for turnover. You know, there are times of the year where all year throughout the year positions are vacant. And that time to fill means that we won't spend every single dollar that we have allotted to have all of those positions full all year. So we do make an adjustment for turnover based on what we see in historical data. We do have a piece of the budget there that's for pay increases in the fourth quarter for April of 2026. We did start a few years back to adjust when we evaluate for pay increases so that we are able to have a better set of data to judge the affordability and sustainability of pay increases across budget years. So when we look at it, when we look at pay increases, the potential for pay increases in January and February, it's during the time when we can look at the current year's budget and where we sit, and also what we are looking at for the following year's budget. So those numbers together come to $23,780,000 for benefits eligible wages and salaries. That's a 1.45% increase over the 24-25 budget and a 3.40% increase over the 24-25 projected. We're going to spend a little less than we thought we would this year on the wages and salary side because we are spending a little bit more on the benefits side. So we can go to the next slide. This next slide gives some details about the part-time staffing allowance. We are allotting approximately 227,000 branch associate hours, which is about 109 FTEs for those frontline staff members in our branches that work part-time. That comes to approximately $4,364,000. We're allotting 44,000 library page hours, which is a little over 21 FTEs, which is $635,800, and about 0.8 FTE of delivery service hours for part-time substitute drivers, which comes to about $30,000. The total part-time staffing allowance in this budget is $5,030,000, which is a 1.21% increase over the 24-25 budget, but a 12.4% increase over 24-25 projected. So we are spending a little bit less on the part-time side than we had thought we would this year. Some of that was allocated for some special projects that in the customer experience department that didn't happen, but they intend to work on those in the upcoming year. So that's why you see that increase over projected. Okay, you can move to the next slide. Just a real quick touch on a couple of items. The Social Security and Medicare taxes, of course, we have to pay those based on what our payroll is going to be. And so that budget is a little over $2 million. We are self-insured, just to remind this committee and this board, we are self-insured for unemployment. So we don't pay unemployment insurance based on our payroll. We pay as we get unemployment claims. The state processes those and then we pay for those. So we're seeing we saw a little bit of an uptick this year, but not much. So that $3,000 budget should be sufficient. We can move to the next slide to talk about some of these other lines in the budget. The top one being tuition reimbursement of $30,000. And that's money that we set aside to provide partial tuition reimbursement to staff members who are pursuing their Master of Library Science degree or other degree programs or certificate programs that are relevant to them upskilling for their position at MCPL. Loggers retirement this year, the contribution rate is going up slightly by 0.3% to 17.4%. And that amount comes to, for our benefits eligible employees, to a little over $4.1 million projected. Dental and vision insurance, we've budgeted for those insurance items for full-time employees, $173,000, $55,000 for life and disability insurance, and just under $4.6 million for our contribution to the health insurance fund, which we'll talk about health insurance a little bit more in detail here in a moment. We have some other expenses that are in the regular operating budget, such as expenses for providing training to staff, excuse me, like compliance training, anti-harassment, anti-discrimination training, as well as some of our other benefits expenses that are administrative in nature, such as the paying for investment advisory for the 457 plan and things like that. So on the next slide, we can talk briefly about the health insurance fund itself and the budget and how the health insurance fund is impacted by the budget. The numbers there is a health insurance fund budget document in board docs. If anybody wants to look at that to go in further detail, what I have on the screen is just a breakdown of what it looks like, what it's likely going to look like for this year as we come out of it, and what we are proposing for next year. You can see a breakdown of where those contributions come from. So there's a library contribution. That's what you see on those revenue lines. So what comes out of the budget and goes into the health insurance fund, and then what comes from employees and some retirees in terms of premium. And that amount has increased this year. If you remember back in October, November, we came and talked to this committee about needing to collect a little bit of premium from full-time staff for employee-only coverage, which came out to $35 a pay period, and that has helped us to cover some of those increased claims costs that we have seen. That actually had us end up starting off this year with a little less in the health insurance fund than what we thought we would see, and a little less than we would like to see, pretty close to the minimum. And you can go down to the expenditures and see a breakout of how we pay for health insurance. So since we are on a cost plus plan, which mimics a self-funded plan, we have administrative costs. So we pay Blue Cross for access to their network and to process our claims. We pay Blue Cross for a stop loss premium. So for those claims that come in for a single person over the course of 12 months, if they have more than 75,000, excuse me, that's wrong now. If they have more than $125,000 of claims, then after they hit that amount, then that stop loss premium is to pay for that reinsurance coverage that keeps us from being catastrophically affected by a large amount of claims. So that stop loss premium means that Blue Cross pays the rest of those claims for the rest of the year for those employees that might have catastrophic events throughout the year. We have a claims budget there just for straight up claims for those expenses that we pay out of the fund. Down at the bottom, it gives you, what our what we expect our ending net position to be coming out of this year, and what we expect it to be coming out of 25-26. And the calculation on those bottom rows is how there is a policy and board policy of what this board wants to see is the minimum amount that's in this health insurance fund to pay for these expenses, and the maximum amount in this health insurance fund to pay for these expenses. And those calculations are based on 3 months of average medical claims from the previous year. This real fund number called IBNR, which means incurred but not received. So that would be if we ended the plan and doing it in this way, we ended the health insurance internal service fund. There would be several months that we would still be paying for claims underneath the previous plan, those run out claims. And that's the actuaries at Lockton will calculate based on our claims history, what that IBNR number is. And when you add that 3-month average together with that IBNR, it tells us the minimum amount that should be in our fund, in our health insurance fund. And then 50% of the projected claim year costs for the upcoming year is what the maximum should be according to policy. So if with this budget, we should be in a much healthier spot in between that minimum and maximum numbers coming out of 24-25 and going into 25-26. Okay, we can go to the next slide and just briefly touch on exceptionality, which is our employee recognition program, which is the money is predominantly spent on recognizing employee tenure at particular milestones and allowing for them to have a token of our appreciation and meaningful celebrations with the staff in their buildings to celebrate when someone has been here and for a period of time. We also recognize National Library Workers Day. So there's money in the budget for that of about $75,000 for 25-26. Okay, well, that's the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Jennifer, if we could go back to probably the second or third screen, I think it was called full-time employees.
417.5,
When you're there, yeah.
that one.
That's it. What jumped out to me was the reduced positions. And I noticed marketing and reader engagement. And it strikes me that considering the absolute treasures that the library has to offer, I'm wondering why are we cutting down on marketing? It seems like with anything, if you have something to be so exceptional to kind of get the word out. I realize that this is probably not your decision. You're receiving the information from other areas, but
Part of that has to do with, when we're doing the capacity evaluation and we might attrit a position from one department, depending on that time, if we do it that way, we are looking at where the greatest need is. So if someone, in this case, if someone in marketing vacated their position, then we would be looking at where across the library system, frankly, where we have need that we have discussed, and then determining whether the need then is greater over here or whether it's to backfill the position that was vacated.
and then with regard to reader engagement, although there's a reduction in positions, and I don't mean this to be an unfair question,
No.
is the extent of services still being maintained in that area?
Yes.
Okay.
And we, Richie has done a good job of challenging that department of looking for ways and looking for things that what ends up happening often is that particularly if someone vacates a position that they've been in for a significant period of time, that there are often some leftover things that we're doing. There might be that we don't have a full understanding of because we're working, every single day, that we take those opportunities to look at those tasks and see if we want to continue to do everything that person was doing before they left. Or is everything still necessary to our current operation? And whether or not if there's some things that we're getting rid of, whether or not the remaining tasks can be absorbed.
Yes.
But we've been able to do this in a way at this point that the public facing piece of it, we're still able to cover those services and provide excellent services. And I think that particularly like with reader engagement, we're talking about in the programming space.
I was thinking too, a number of times it happened to be at a branch and there'd be young kids reading time, story time, and certainly the reading rocket. I mean that's not going to be in any way infringed in terms of services, right?
And just a little bit of history there. Reader engagement is a relatively newly created department within the organization. And it was formed by consolidating 3 separate entities together.
Correct.
So in doing that, some efficiencies were gained by having everybody under one umbrella. And you do bring up a good point. So storytime facilitation is always handled at the local level. Reading Rocket is considered a mission enhancement. And it's not under this reporting structure either.
Yeah, and then I think the next slide, I had a question regarding that, it's just a very general question.
Which slide is that?
I think it's in benefits or something like the next one.
Let's look and see.
Yeah,
Go back.
two back.
When we're talking about compensation, right there.
Yeah, there, yeah. When you're talking about determining the structure, did you refer to other libraries or similar services outside governmental areas?
Yes, it would be both of those things. So, so when we did the 2022 data study, we were using a dozen. I mean, that we used a consultant that had access to a dozen different aggregate databases, and so, you know, when we're looking for library specific positions, that's where that data is going to come from. And then when we're looking at something like, you know, finance or human resources, then we're broadening it and we're looking at nonprofits and often school districts is a sector that we can get good compensation data that's comparable for the work that we do. And has, you know, they have similar access to benefits and things like that. So it turns out to be really good compensation data. We also do participate in studies for libraries when other libraries conduct their own compensation studies. Some of them will use their own smaller firm that will get compensation data from library systems across the country that are comparable in size and structure to them. And when we participate in those, we get that market compensation data. We just got some, which was good to have. It was a really good study to participate in.
And you feel comfortable with that new data compared to what's?
Yeah, I really, I mean, compared to, I had done a similar comparison to one that we participated in about 6 years ago. And that we are in much better shape comparison wise than we were then.
Sure. And just the last question, I promise. Towards the end of your presentation, you had an adjustment for the fourth quarter on
Increases.
eligible benefits.
Uh-huh.
And I think it said like one, I'm not sure, I wasn't sure how that number equated.
Well,
to
this year
percent.
for 2025, we did a 3% pay increase. And so that's about what's in this budget for next year. Of course, it's gonna, when we get to, then we're gonna be we will always be looking at whether, you know, whatever we're looking at that's sustainable. So do we still have the funds for this budgeted year? Because we don't know what's gonna happen over the course of that fiscal year.
Sure.
So waiting until that point has turned out to be a good decision. And then also we'll be looking at the next year's budget and which, you know, helps us. And when I say, do we know whether we're going to give those pay increases? The plan is yes, right? And then, you know, depending on what happens with, you know, funding, with property taxes, with, you know, different scenarios that we know could be anything at this point. COVID taught us that. That's what that is. And it's about, it's for about a 3%. It's a 3% pool of money. But determining how we apply those pay increases will depend on how the year goes and what the circumstances are, the contributing factors are at that time.
Okay.
And then the wage structure that I think what you're talking about is we did move the entire wage structure. So primarily the minimums and midpoints of the wage structure by 1%. So that brings those starting wages up, and according to the data that we have, keeps those midpoints on target with what's happening in the market.
And I said that was the last question, but actually, this is the last question. Last year, I think it was the Department of Labor changed its definition of salaried employees and all that, and then I think the courts reversed that. Number one, do we know what the status it is? And secondly, did that have any impact on your department?
So that was the second time that had happened, where there was a significant, you know, a proposed rule that was going to be a significant increase in that salary, that minimum salary threshold. And last time the courts reversed it. This time they did too. They took longer, but we needed to do an exempt, non-exempt audit anyway. So we elected to do that ahead of the implementation of that. And so now we're in a much better place there, where we would be able to absorb operationally without there being additional budgetary concerns, if they were to now increase that threshold. So so the impact of that would be nominal to none, because we did go ahead and decide to do that audit and react to ahead of time.
Thank you. Great.
Joycelyn, do you have any
Hey.
questions?
Hi, Joycelyn.
Hi, how you doing? I think Ron asked all the questions I had. Very good questions, Ron. Because my concern was too about the reduction in youth services. You know, it's always my radar, but I know that, as you said, that you're auditing those positions, you're making sure the front facing portions of that, and looking at other ways to do that. And I know specifically in that arena, you've had a lot of people in positions for a long time. So there was probably a lot of restructuring that went on that allowed that the number of employees to be reduced there. Also, I think with our connecting the MCPL library card with the school's library system also helped to reduce some of that as well. But go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I was just going to interject that youth services is one of those departments that was folded into reader engagement. So it was Katie McDonald that led youth services, who's now head of reader engagement. And the team transitioned into the reader engagement department. It's been reorganized.
And I do want to point out, because I don't think I made that clear, that list of reductions and additions in positions is over the course of these previous 3 fiscal years. So it wasn't just what we did over the course of 1 year. So those additions and reductions were over the course of 3 fiscal years. And we're all taken care of via attrition and reallocation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think all my questions have been answered, and I just want to say thank you, Jennifer, for another very thorough, very informative presentation. You always do a very good job, so thank you.
Nice.
Are there any other questions or anything anyone else wanted to say? If not, you can all go home after we vote to adjourn.
Yeah, vote to adjourn even, Joycelyn.
That's right.
You
All
can't
right.
vote to, but we will.